Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jerred Moon here with Joe
Great,
Courtney.
man. How are you?
How you doing, Joe? I am fantastic. We'll get right into it. We'll be doing some updates at the end of the podcast, also answering some questions about my recent blood work we got in the community. So if you're interested in those kind of things, stick around to the end. Today we're going to be covering a study that is called Cardiorespiratory and Aerobic Demands of Squat Exercise. It was done in the later part of 2024. And I'll just go over some of the basics, but the big idea here is, do squats count as cardio? That's it. Like, that's the question this study was trying to answer, which I think is kind of funny because anybody who likes to lift a lot more than they like cardio makes that joke all the time. And it's a joke with a ton of truth in it if you've ever done a back squat with any significant amount of reps, especially if you ever have done like a 20 rep max back squat. Like, that's about as bad as like a 7-minute, 2,000 meter row. Like in my opinion, they're very, very similar as far as the demand. And so as an athlete, you can just feel that. So is there any scientific backing to squats being cardio? So let's talk about the study, big picture. 22 healthy resistance trained young men. They're between the ages of 20 and 39. They all had at least 1 year of experience squatting over 120% of their body weight, which I thought was pretty decent for a study, being able to recruit people who are relatively strong. They are divided into high strength and low strength groups based on the squat 1 rep max relative to their body weight. And they aimed to quantify aerobic demand of the back squat exercise, which is something that's considered anaerobic traditionally. We'll get into that more. They measured oxygen consumption, so VO2, and heart rate during 5 sets of 10 reps at 65% of their 1 rep max, and they had 3-minute rest intervals between. So the protocol is important if you're looking to implement this. So again, 5 sets, 10 reps, 65%, 1 rep max, 3 minutes rest in between. And it also explored whether relative strength and influenced the cardiorespiratory response. Let's see. I'll just dive into how they did it, and then we can kind of get into it. So the first visit, they did VO2 max testing on the treadmill. And then the second visit, they did 1 rep max squat testing to establish their 1 rep max. And then the third visit, they did 5 squats at 65%, 3-minute rest. And then they measured gas exchange, and heart rate was tracked throughout. And all of the measurements were VO2, VCO2, heart rate, and RPE during the sets. And I think that's about all we need to talk about before we dive into it any further. The key takeaways were that, yes, it does tax the cardiovascular system pretty hard. Could be considered conditioning, but with an asterisk. So, and I want to dive into a lot more of the programming of this for our athletes and for anybody trying to do squats for cardio. But Joe, what do you think of this study?
Something that I've been percolating in my head to think about, at least focusing on and targeting around training earlier this year, something that I was thinking of doing, and that is just recording and measuring all of my workouts in all of the zones that I'm in throughout. Like normally I do strength, and then conditioning days is when I'm paying attention to those. But I wanted to, because I got it in my head that thinking that okay, how much strength stuff we do, and sometimes the strength can be kind of intense. I'm definitely getting into zone 2 during those times. So my thought process, well, if I'm getting enough zone 2 during my strength days, then maybe I don't need to do as much on my condition days, and condition days I can focus on the higher end condition output. And so this study sort of maybe go back and think about that again. I don't know if you ever looked into that from a programming standpoint or from your own conditioning standpoint, because I mean, to me it makes sense, but I know I'm a little bit out of my depth in that regard.
Yeah, I think that, and that's something you look at, and we've talked about this because even with our programming, we're like, let's do a 40-minute, just grunt style workout, not like not a Metcon, but run on the treadmill, carry a sandbag, swing a kettlebell, like all of these kind of things, and let's do it for 40, 50 minutes. Stay in zone 2. Is that okay? Is that still zone 2 conditioning? And it absolutely is. And then it comes to the question of how much bleed over is there between all of these things? And so when I look at it, I'm looking at the three different energy systems because I think that they were asking a good question, but I think they were looking at it wrong. Because if we're looking at how do we actually improve, there's always going to be some sort of, you know, time under tension or just time on task, if you will, for endurance training. Like you have to spend a certain amount of time to do things. So squat, ultimately them saying like, yeah, this is something that could ultimately be used as conditioning. It could double as conditioning. It's very true, but it has an asterisk. So what you're saying is like, if I'm just doing a bunch of like low level strength training, could I say I'm in zone two? And I think so, but I would like challenge the notion like your rest periods might need to be walking on a treadmill or walking around the gym. Because I think if you come all the way down on the recovery, then you're not getting the same benefit that you would if you were to go do a long walk, ruck, or, low zone two run or something like that, or, whatever, moderate intensity. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. So anyway, going back to the energy systems, we have the alactic, glycolytic, and oxidative, right? And so the alactic system is pretty much dominant for 10 seconds or less, glycolytic 20 to 60 seconds up to 90 seconds, and then the oxidative is the true aerobic system greater than 60 seconds. And this protocol specifically, if you just look at it, the sets were lasting about 30 seconds, and by the fifth set, they were hitting an RPE of 10, so this is very taxing for them. Their VO2 max was very, very escalated by the end of the sets, their oxygen consumption, and they even reported some of their VO2 max numbers, and I think the average was around 47 for all of these people in the study, which is not bad. That's not a bad VO2 max, because when I was looking at this, I was like, there's so much that you have to consider, because if I took like a true power lifter who never lifted more than 3 or 4 repetitions, never did any kind of conditioning, and I made them do 5 sets of 10 or 5 sets of 20, yeah, it's going to heavily tax their VO2 max, but it's because they're in such bad shape. It's like almost anything is going to tax that. But these people were in decent shape. They had a decent VO2 max. High 40s was the average. I think that's pretty good overall. And they were still getting taxed. But they weren't, what you're not training here at all is the oxidative system. So I don't think it can truly replace the oxidative style of training if we're looking at those three energy systems. So you have to have all three to be a really well-rounded athlete. So I think that what you're looking at here is like, yes, this could be some really decent glycolytic conditioning, not at like a level 10 glycolytic, but probably like a level 7 glycolytic conditioning, and could replace other forms of conditioning that you were going to do for glycolytic in its place. Like if you're looking to put this in your program.
Sustaining would be pretty important, and it's sort of hard to extrapolate how much of the cardio, what sort of cardio benefit that you would get for how long you're doing it, or what you might define as like your cardio goal, whether it's just burning calories or like shooting for zones and stuff. So I would like to measure mine a little bit more, just to, especially as the heat starts coming on. But it did also remind me of the, you sort of mentioned it before, the mixed modal aerobic work that we've been doing on Hard to Kill is sort of like a hybrid on it. And I know that like when it's really hot out, and I actually pulled some of my data from back when I was in Bahrain, is that like I would do some of these hard sets, and then while you're recovering, you're not really recovering that much lower. So if some of the more intense sets that we're doing, sometimes we'll do like whether it's supersets or trisets, and if it's warm out and your heart rate is sustaining at a higher level, then to me you could kind of view this as bang for buck. As if you're on your strength sessions and you go to look at your zones after your strength sessions and you're spending a lot of time in zone 2, then maybe you can dedicate your actual conditioning sessions to like, okay, I'm going to do these high, the alactic sprints or whatever, instead of a zone 2 day, because this week I've already gotten all my zone 2 in, or I've gotten a ton of zone 2 in. And what made me think about this is, the dreaded Garmin breakdown of your zones. It always has like zone 2 is really, really high. My anaerobic is optimal, but then like my higher aerobic is like just a little tiny sliver. And I'm like, well, how am I getting all of this zone 2, like overdoing the zone 2 work almost? So how can I bring this down and then maybe focus on that part So maybe I should shift instead of my zone 2 day to do those higher aerobic days. And that's kind of where my brain was earlier this year. And I was thinking of like, maybe I'll have to wear a heart rate monitor for every single workout, which would kind of suck, especially because the chest ones can kind of chafe after a while. But that's kind of how I was viewing, and sort of a takeaway of the study, how it could be used is if we're doing more intense strength cycle or sets or whatever the program might dictate, you could view it as a bang for your buck thing. Like, okay, well, I'm going to lean into, sort of comboing, getting a dual effect, and then I'll use the time where I would have done something else to do to train something else.
Yeah, and real quick, just like tactically on the Garmin thing, because I've run into this issue before. I went on some sort of like lactate threshold run, and I didn't have this was before this watch. I think it was my previous watch. And
Yeah.
you know how the wrist-based heart rate's like, I don't know, it's okay. Yeah. And I mean on the newer model that I have, I feel like it's a lot better. Like I don't wear chest strap anymore. But it was like it it asks you sometimes after you have a really hard workout, like if you want to adjust your max heart rate. I don't know if you've seen that before. And I said yes, but it adjusted it to like 208, something like that, like 208, 210, somewhere around there as my max heart rate. And I was like, sure. I think because it had observed something close, but I don't think that my heart rate ever came close to that number. You know what I mean? Like I think, especially you, like I don't know if you have a lower heart rate anyway. Like I don't know if you could ever get that high. My point being is it was improper. It was an improper max heart rate listed in Garmin. And so that like middle tier orange that you're talking about, that like lactate threshold that it tries to measure, is almost impossible to get now, even when you're doing higher intensity work. So when you're doing higher intensity work, it's like say your heart rate's 178, and it's like, that's great, but this is still not, threshold work. And you're like, bullshit, it's not threshold work. Like it definitely is, right? So that's one thing with the Garmin thing is it's based so heavily on the max heart rate. You got to make sure that that's very accurate. I look at mine pretty frequently now ever since that, because that happened to me. It's like you're never training with any intensity. I'm like, no, yes, I am. Like I'm doing like these crazy 400-meter intervals. I can't even breathe after. And you're telling me like I'm just in the green. Like it's like, moderate workout. And it's because my max heart rate was so far off. So just something to keep in mind there. But what you're saying and what I think this study hits on is my ultimate takeaway. And it's what I've been wanting to look at forever. And I'm glad that like science is moving this direction is this overlap in concurrent training. So can lower base strength work be considered zone 2? Yes, could, because this is not that. This was taxing them like pretty heavily. This was taxing them in the glycolytic zone. Like they were having significant response. They were consuming a lot of oxygen, right? Just like you would if you're doing a VO2 max workout. And so they were in this glycolytic zone, and it only got worse as things progressed, even though they had 3-minute rest intervals, which tells me their body wasn't clearing the lactate. They weren't able to recover as quickly. So they didn't have these massive aerobic engines, but they were getting this glycolytic workout. So if I were to just go super practical, super tactical for somebody who wants to do a concurrent training split, a hybrid athlete split, let's call it 6 days per week, and you got 3 days lifting, 3 days running. That's what a lot of people are doing these days. If you're doing any kind of like hybrid or concurrent training, that's not specifically like our take and our training. And so how you could look at this, and if you're doing it properly, how you would lift those 3 days is up to you, whether that's bodybuilding, powerlifting, whatever. You could do 3 full body splits. You could do an upper, lower, accessory, whatever you want on the strength side. But on the conditioning side, the best split for 3 days a week in a concurrent training split would be having like a zone 2 day, having like a threshold day, which would be like harder, like 15-minute runs, 20-minute runs, something where it's like, it's not a long run, but you're still getting that like aerobic threshold training, right? And then you'd have like an interval day. So super short duration, speed work, whatever. Those are like the 3 days that you would typically do. And that's how people do it, because they look at concurrent training or hybrid athlete training so black and white. And the thing I've been arguing for years is that you don't need to look at it that way. So if you did squats that were taxing you this hardcore, you could get away from having to do any of the middle work. Like you wouldn't have to do the threshold work. You could just work on speed work and zone 2 work, and you could skip the other one. that's because you're already covering it in your program. And so to do this like really taxing, back squat day, and then the next day be like, well, to keep up with my run program that I just copied from like a elite endurance runner, I need to do my threshold day. It's like you already checked that box from an energy systems training perspective. You already checked that box. You don't need to go do that again. And so there's a lot of bleed over here. So if you did this kind of protocol, 5 sets 10 at 65%, 3 minutes rest, in all honesty, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, I don't think this would be that taxing for me. I honestly don't. 65% is not a ton. 10 reps, not a crazy amount. You give me 3 minutes, I'm going to recover from just about anything. And so these were obviously strength athletes, not like true concurrent hybrid training athletes. So if you're more like me or a concurrent training athlete already, you probably need to increase the percentage to 75% maybe, or increase the reps. Keep it at 65, go up to 15, something like that, and do multiple sets for you to get that taxation. And so if you were to do that, do this bleed over, you wouldn't have to do all these different training modalities. And that's what we've been arguing the whole time, is like, let's just make it all work together. Let's just have these different modalities that we're hitting, but we're not hitting it with just having to run or just having to lift. We're trying to combine a lot of different things across the month of our hard to kill programming.
That's definitely something, especially as we get into summer. I think it's really good to pay attention to how your heart rate is responding to your strength days. Because garage gym athletes, if you're lifting in your garage and you're the weather is gonna bleed in, you're gonna have hot, muggy garage days. I know my basement is it's not super hot, like high 70s ish in the summer, but like the humidity is like 80+%, so it's really muggy down there with no breeze. So I know mine will get up a little bit higher, and so when I was pulling my data from working out in Bahrain back in 2021, it was over 100 degrees when I was working out at 7:30 in the morning, getting up to 110 plus, and between that and lifting in October, my average heart rate was 15 beats higher, and I burned about 300 more calories doing just the regular sort of strength days, being in that ridiculous heat. And I remember like my heart rate just not fully recovering in between sets because it's so hot, so that I'm pretty much staying in zone 2 toward the end of the workout in between sets, even though it's just the same strength work. So yeah, definitely this is a feather in the cap for bang for your buck on workouts and having some overlap so that you can focus on other things.
Yeah, and temperature is like huge. We talked about this back in the day when I would do Murph across the summer. It's like my Murph times would get so much worse in the summer because I'm always doing it outside and it's so hot. But then I would start to PR in the fall, in the winter, because you were able to slug through all that like temperature stuff. And like I actually look at that training wise, like in the winter, for obvious reasons, I try and stay inside. I try and stay in the garage or whatever in the winter when it's cold outside. And that's not because like I'm scared of cold. It's because I feel like I didn't work out if it's 30 degrees and I'm outside training. Like you can wear enough layers, but like I'll get a workout in, but you don't start sweating until like minute 45, or at least me. I'm like, okay, now I'm breaking a sweat. Like I just don't like that. I like to sweat. So now it's getting warmer here in Texas. My training's moving back outside. It's like for the reasons you're talking about. It's like I want that extra taxation of my body having to cool itself, additional sweat, all those kind of things, because it's all conditioning. It's all part of like your body improving and adapting to a stimulus.
I'm looking forward to my first winter coming up.
Yeah, it's gonna be rough. So anyway, big takeaway here is this kind of training would probably. It would not suffice as true aerobic conditioning if you're looking to do this, but it would be good middle distance training. So like to put this very apples to apples, if you were to do this style of squat training, it might help you with 400 meter improvement, 800 meter improvement, maybe up to a mile. But it's not you can't do squats and go run a half marathon, right? Like it doesn't go that far. But it does help with this middle distance conditioning, which is anything from like 1 to 4 laps around the track if you want to put it into kind of pure running context. And that's why I think our program, One Man One Barbell, is like such a good strength and conditioning program because it checks this box like crazy. Because think about it, we're doing EMOM work. We're not doing 3-minute rest. We're doing that protocol with more reps and less rest time in the same percentages, right? So like one man one barbell is very taxing, it's very high volume, but if you can knock out one man one barbell training, and I know a lot of our athletes have, you get significant levels of conditioning from that. I know when I was in the military and I was running 9-minute mile and a halves for the Air Force PT test, I was not running all that much. I was doing a lot of one man one barbell work, occasional like mile times. I do some longer runs here and there, but a lot of it, like predominantly, I'd say 70% of my training was strength work, but it was one man one barbell strength work, which is not lazy strength work. It's hard as shit strength work. And that's what I was doing when I had a really high level of conditioning. Running 9-minute mile and a half is nothing to to sneeze at. It's pretty solid time for somebody who's not like a true endurance athlete.
Add on to that. So with the EMOM work on Strength Track, August is when we're doing the exponential EMOM strength protocol. And just to give a little preview of that, so on Strength Track, that's what it's going to be for 3 weeks in August. But those sets go 5x5 at 55%. Now, this isn't every minute on the minute EMOM. Rest a minute, 5x3 at 60%. Rest a minute, 5x2 at 65%. Rest a minute, and then you have 4x1 every 30 seconds at 75%. And then it just builds up from there each week.
The exponential EMOM method
Always
is brutal.
It's definitely one of my favorites, but it's one of those where you just kind of look at and like, whew, you got to mentally prepare, like really mentally prepare for this.
Yeah, gosh, I feel like I need to get on that strength cycle, but I'm enjoying Hard to Kill. But that's it for the study. Hopefully you got some takeaways there. Like, yes, it can be conditioning, but only a part of a well-rounded conditioning program. Like they used to say about like cereal commercials in the 90s, they'd be like,
breakfast.
This is part of a well-rounded
part of this complete training program.
I feel like that's my ultimate takeaway here. Yeah, this method is only part of having a full healthy training method. Don't make it your true conditioning, but it can be part of it. But let's get into some updates. I'll answer the question first. See, John from the community was asking about blood work. So I did that recent podcast on basically I was just talking about my testosterone, right? And he was asking, here, let me pull it up. He said, do you get your blood work done through your PCP? What exactly do you ask for? What blood markers are you looking to tracking all over time? And do you need to specify those when you ask for blood work? Yes, this is a great question because it oftentimes, like, I forget when you're in the traditional medical system or like a PCP, or for instance, you, Joe, like if you go to a military doc, especially in the military, they're going to do like the bare minimum because it costs them money, right? And you don't have to pay anything for it, at least on the military side most of the time. So you have to like request specific things. And most of the time people are relatively price sensitive moving away from the military. So your doctor might only get like the bare minimum of like your metabolic function and not anything else. I don't work with a doctor like that.
Just comment on that. Like 2 months ago, I just had mine done. And I called them like, hey, I wanted to get blood work done. And they were like, okay, what blood work do you want? And I said, well, I want a full blood panel and something else and like testosterone. They're like, okay, cool. We have to set up an appointment with you and your PCM to talk about it first in order for him because he has to order it. And then so I had to have a video call with him or a phone call with him. And I told him just like why and what was going on. And then he like, luckily mine here is like really, really awesome. He's like, yeah, let's do it all. Let's do this. Let's do this. I recommend this. And all that is great. And like, so mine is really awesome. But sometimes some of them could just be like, you don't really need that yet until this age. You don't need that until this age. Let's just do this kind of thing. So I guess it depends on how good yours is and what maybe even your insurance works or whatever that is. But that's how mine works. So I had to get a pre-appointment before they even did that. And then I went and got my blood draw.
Yeah. And that was my experience when I was in the military. It was like, and even after I got out, when I was just like trying to see a doctor through like insurance or whatever, it was always like this. They're like, yeah, well, we'll tell you your cholesterol and your insulin. And there wasn't like a whole lot of like other things involved. And now I get a full blood panel. So what you have to ask for, I won't go over like every single thing that you need, but I do blood work one of two ways. I have the functional med doc here who is cash pay. And so there is no insurance involved in this. I have to pay to see her in cash, and then I have to pay for the blood work completely out of pocket. My insurance doesn't cover it. And I'm okay with doing that at least once per year. And then she covers, I mean, she wants to know everything when she does the blood work. So we're going over all the hormonal profiles. We're doing metabolic profiles. We're doing nutrient testing, like how much B12 and all that other stuff. And then typical like red blood cells, white blood cells, like that kind of stuff. But another place that you can do this that really tracks just about everything that she would typically track is Inside Tracker, which I use. I kind of bounce back and forth. Like if I don't have anything that I'm specifically trying to optimize with a doctor, I just want to get my blood work, I will go just to do Inside Tracker. And you can have someone go to your house, or you can go to like a LabCorp and just get a blood draw, and then they put it in a portal and they kind of break it down for you as well. But I like having a doctor look at things where I don't like just sit there and guess or Google or ChatGPT. Like I want to talk to somebody who knows what's up. And like, cause there's some things that might be like, I had one thing flagged and she's like, this isn't even clinically relevant. Like it really doesn't matter for you. And so like, you know, that's though just, it's good to know those things. Right. And so that's how I typically do it. Inside Tracker is a great place. They test just about everything you'd want to know if you're looking to get it pulled. And then with your doctor, you really have to be very specific. So without going over like, here are all the things that you want to test, if you want to do this through your doctor, maybe just go to Inside Tracker, get a list of what they check, and then just take that to your doctor and be like, at a minimum, here's what I want, and then anything that you recommend. And a big reason I do this, I talked about on the testosterone podcast that like I was trying to optimize that, get that back up to where I wanted it, but I'm just looking for trends. And I'm going to do this with my kids, not yet, but when they get closer to probably 18, somewhere around there, I'm gonna make them be on annual blood draws. It's something I wish I would have done. That way you can see how you change, like what fluctuates for you. Because I go back to, you know, my testosterone, free testosterone being in the mid 800s. Some guys I know are in the 400s and they're operating great, and that's just for them, but they were in the 200s and they doubled it, they got in the 400s. And then I know some guys who are in the 900s, you know, like it's different for every single person. So when I was lower in the 6-7s, I was feeling off. And it was but I had years of blood work to look back and be like, okay, here's where you typically feel good. And it's in the 800s. And it's like, okay, that's the goal. That's what I'm shooting for. But if I didn't have anything to look back on in the past, I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know what I'm optimizing for, or if anything was even different. So the bigger takeaway with blood work is to be on some sort of cadence. That's why a lot of people just do this stuff on your birthday, where you don't have to remember. It's just like, hey, it's your birthday. Congrats. Go to the dentist and also get some blood work done. You just like be on this cadence, right? So that's a bigger thing with blood work. After you getting it done is to keep having it done, so you always have these baselines for yourself.
Yeah, I definitely dropped the ball for a couple of years.
I'm in.
I just got done this year, and then the last time was 2018 or 2019. Luckily, I still saved the papers from when I got that done, like the hard copies of it. And so as the doctor was going through my results, I was actually looking at like what it was in the past and telling him like what it was, what's changed, and stuff like that. So that was pretty good.
Yeah, and that's another reason why I like the going to a functional med doc too, because one thing that was flagged on me that was high was total cholesterol, right? And that's genetic for me. It's you know, it's my family history. Like everybody has a lot of our high cholesterol, and she's like, but she goes over, she like runs this like analysis of like I forgot what it is, some sort of like equation they do to see if it's actually dangerous. But then she's like, well, your triglycerides are basically like the lowest they could possibly be, which is great. Your inflammation markers are damn near zero. Like, she's like, I'm really not concerned with having higher cholesterol. And that's where the doctor comes in, right? Because like, if I didn't have her, I'd be like, okay, well, what should I be eating Cheerios or getting on some sort of medication? You know, and so that's why it's always good to have not just a doctor, but like a functional med doc or somebody who's like because cholesterol, like there's so much stuff good and bad on it, but it's like if every other metabolic and inflammatory marker for me is optimized, then it's like, how concerning is cholesterol? And she said that she had a very interesting point when we went over my blood work. She was like, she used to be an ER doc before she does what she does now. And she said that she can't tell you how many times she saw people with perfect cholesterol markers who were coming in with heart attacks. Like she's like I just not a huge believer of this being like the the canary in the coal mine, because like she's like these people would have like stellar blood work on the cholesterol side, but then they're coming in, to get a stent or like whatever that they needed to do in an emergency situation. And she's like, so it's just not. I don't think there's as
That's
much
wild.
correlation as
Yeah,
people
when
think that
I
there
I
is.
got my results, so like we have an online portal, and they would come through online, and I could check them, but I didn't have my appointment for like 3 weeks, and I was like, oh man, all my cholesterol markers were either bad or the good one was low, and I was like, okay, I gotta make some changes, and it's probably good to have a little bit of a gut check every once in a while. So I started looking up all these higher fiber foods. I switched from primarily chicken instead of like some of the pork and stuff we've been eating. So I made a whole bunch of changes, and 3 weeks in, I had my appointment, and mine did that calculation too. He asked me like some questions. He went over a bunch of different markers, and he was like, "All right, you have a less than 2% chance of any heart-related incident. Congratulations." Like, oh, okay. Well, I guess I don't need to worry that much, but I'll still keep on this path. But that's still, kind of good to know.
Yeah, that's why you have to have the doctor. Like I don't like the doctor Google. That's why I don't like the Inside Tracker sometimes too. Like I said, I'll do Inside Tracker. Like I said, I'm not trying to optimize anything, or I'm not concerned about anything. But I'm also, it's not like my doctor's pissed that I didn't use her. Like if I have get Inside Tracker blood work and then I go see her, I mean she'd be fine with that. So like I could be like, hey, I'm a little concerned about this. So anyway, that's it on blood work. Hopefully that's helpful. Updates, man. How are you doing? How's training? How's
So
life?
I went since last update. I think I went back to California for 2 weeks, and then came back. So that's a 9-hour difference. So jet lag both ways, because 2 weeks is just enough time to adjust over there and then come right back, and then here we go again. So basically, I had 3 weeks
All right.
of jet lag training, and for some reason, this time of year, for this time, because it hasn't happened in any 5 or 6 years that I've been going to my base in California, allergies were absolutely horrendous, like the worst I have ever felt. And I did like one run day to try and prime myself because I was getting ready for my PT test, and the run loop, it's a really good path. It goes through fields from the main part of base all the way to the base housing, but it's all field. And then after I got done with that, I was in bad shape from an allergy standpoint. Like from then on, it was just completely draining, itchy, sneezing, and it was awful. So that definitely affected my runtime. But I was there for 13 full days, not counting 2 travel days, and I still did some sort of activity or training 12 of the 13 days. So I only actually took one rest day, which was pretty good for me, because a lot of times when traveling, it's really hard to, especially jet lag, it's really hard to just not do something. So I did it, even like pretty much my goal starting off those training days was like, I'm just gonna do 30 minutes of something. And like day one is always the worst from jet lag. You almost feel like it's almost like those hangover sweats, to where you're a little bit hotter than you should be. You feel your sweat more than you should. You're a little bit, even dizzy. And that was just a really easy 30 minutes of like incline walking. I got off, did some supersets, did some more incline walking just to do, and then I think it did help. But yeah, so training wise for that, I did better than I expected, even if it wasn't that hard workouts. And now I'm here, back here, back to normal. I did also, to double tap on updates, play soccer this week for the first time in 4 years at almost 37. They
Achilles and
are
hamstring
no
still
serious
intact.
injuries. I did roll my ankle once. I have,
All right,
just kind
good.
of weak ankles, and especially going side to side. And when you make contact with somebody, you're just not used to that compensation. But surprisingly, my conditioning for that was pretty spot on. I felt pretty good the entire time. I was still able to do like a full field sprint, fast break from one end to the other. I was good. I still kept going. So that was great. It was just my skills that really were lacking, because I haven't played in 4 years, and my shoes also fell apart, so that didn't help. But it went pretty well, although super sore for the next 2 days. I was 2 days ago, so my groin's still really sore. It's always the groin and hip flexors. But it was fun.
Yeah. Any any athletic activity is gonna crush us as time goes on. But that's cool, man. Yeah, when you had all the allergy problems, you weren't taking allergy meds,
I
were you? Because
absolutely
it
was.
crushes your endurance
Well, it gains. I didn't care about
gains.
gains. I just wanted to be about what my baseline was before I went to Spain.
Maintain.
it
Yeah.
did not return to that. It got better, more bearable, but it was still pretty dang bad. Yeah, and then of course always on the PT test day, it's super windy, so running into the wind half the track is just terrible. So yeah,
Yeah, I remember the worst that ever was, and I think I told this podcast on the story years ago, is when I was still in the
mm,
reserves, and I had to drive up to Wichita Falls to do a PT test, and the wind kept blowing out of limits to where like you're not allowed to take the PT test, and then it eventually like it sustained above the wind level you're allowed to like take the PT test, and I was like, dude, come on, like I drove 2 hours up here. Like, I'm not one of those guys who's on the threshold to where the wind's going to make or break a pass fail here. I was like, just let me do it. And he, like, I was the only one that he let do it. He let me do it. And it was one of the worst run times I ever had because also their track is a 1 mile loop. It's an actual
oh yeah, I
track, too.
remember
I've never
that
seen anything like it. Like, I've
Wichita.
never
Yeah,
seen, you're talking about like the red rubber track with like white lines. Like it's one of those tracks, but it's 1 mile. It's this like giant uh, loop. And so when you're running against the wind, it's for a half mile straight down. Then there's this like short turn, and then it's at your back. Really helps on when it's at your back. Really sucks when you're running into it. And now that's the most I've ever seen an effect from wind like in performance. It's like, oh wow, this actually does matter like quite a bit because it was one of my worst times. But yeah, I was nowhere close to like failing it or anything. But
yeah.
that was psycho. Um, as far as training for me, I've just been sticking to hard to kill track mostly. I was gone for a week. Wife and I went on a trip for our 15th wedding anniversary. And so while I was out of town, I was just doing basic stuff. Like I worked out pretty much every day, but I'd either like just run a couple miles on the treadmill at the gym they had there, or do like Murph reps, like 5, 10, 15 till I felt good. Pull ups, push ups, squats, those kind of things. I just kept it real simple, doing like 30, 40-minute workouts just to get something in. But it was good, man. That's basically it. It's about to be summer with the kids out of school, and so they'll give me probably most of my activity on top of my training. Just with like doing different sports with them and training them. So I'm really looking forward to it because that's what we do in the summer. I don't train my kids during the year. They have a lot of sports, school, everything else going on. But then when summer hits, I take over their training, strength and conditioning. So that's about to kick up here in the next couple
This will
days, and
be
I'm
no.
really looking
You
forward
would
to
have
that.
the same gym last year.
Yep. Yeah, and I normally have them invite one or two friends. And this is a pro tip for any dads out there who are looking to train their kids or have them work out. Invite a friend over. If they have another athletic friend whose parents are kind of into that or whatever, have the friend come over every day that they train. We have basically a neighbor friend who's they've been on the same football team, Graham and him, for a number of years, and very athletic, wants to train. Parents are super into it, and I do it for free. I'm not charging these people, right? And so they love that part of it as well. But I actually get the most benefit out of that, not their kid. My benefit is my kids won't give me any crap if a friend is over, and they'll be competitive with the friend as opposed to like if I'm like, hey, do this hard thing for 30 seconds or whatever, they'll just complain to me about it, right? And I don't want to sit there and have to yell at them. But if they have a friend who's just willing to do it because he's there to listen and do the work, and I'm not his dad, they
Hack.
just compete with him. There's no
Yeah.
arguments. Like it's a true hack because like he didn't show up a few times last summer, this kid, and how much harder it was to train my two boys when it's just me and them is exponentially like 10 times harder. They give me so much crap, push back, all this kind of stuff. So if you think that any of this is easy for me, it's absolutely not. But I found a hack. You just invite the friend over, and that takes
Sounds
care
like
of
a
about
sandbag
90%
walk
of the
day
issue
or
there.
something.
So yeah, it's just funny. Like I don't know. They'll do a lot of things, but some of the harder things, it's hard to get them to push
Yeah,
without
that makes
having
sense.
some sort of competition there. But I think that's about it for this one. Good to catch up, and for all of our athletes, if you have any questions, throw them in the community, and happy to answer them here on the podcast. But that's it for this one. If you want to join our training, go to garagegymathlete.com, sign up for a free trial, and we'd love to have you. Remember, if you don't kill comfort, comfort will kill you.